All right, everybody, I am back working on the Impala, and I've already been out here blowing the motor off with my air nozzle and blowing out the engine compartment and just giving it a good once over. And I've already found some wires that were chewed up from either mice or squirrels or something. Not very happy, but let me flip the camera around and show you what I found. So as I said, I just got this thing cleaned off. Just literally found this less than a minute ago. These wires are chewed up. These wires are chewed up. I'm sure there's other ones that are chewed up. Transmission wire is chewed up and broken through. So I'm sure I'm gonna find other stuff that I have to fix, but this is just the beginning. At least I can get to all the bolts now. I can actually see the condition of the engine because this thing was covered in acorns and leaves and sticks and all kinds of shit. So got it blown off. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start removing the transmission. Once I get the transmission removed, then I'll bolt this onto an engine stand. So now that I have the engine out of the car, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the transmission from the engine. I'm gonna remove the oil cooler lines and remove the flex plate for the torque converter and get it to where I can mount it on a stand. But the first things that need to be done to remove the transmission from the car is make sure that sensor right there is disconnected. And that's the wire for the O2 sensor. And then we need to disconnect this connector. To disconnect it, you squeeze on the sides. You can see a little spot there and a little spot there. Squeeze on those, and then it comes off. And we got the speed sensor back here in the corner, and it's got a button on the bottom, or a tab, locking tab on the top and the bottom. So, damn it, I just popped it back on the bottom one. All right, so I got the top one to release. There we go. So now both of those are off. I need to take that bolt out to get that clamp loose. And then all this wiring will come off when I take the clamp right here off. So then, once I get that clamp and that clamp off, the wiring's completely separated from the transmission. Then I can take the torque converter cover off. So it's a bolt right here, right here. They look like they're 9/16. And then there's gonna be two on the other side as well. Yeah, right there and right there. And then I also need to take these lines off. That's gonna be disconnected right there. Put a wrench on here to hold this side and then turn this one. Same on this one. And then both of those lines will come completely off. And then you'll have to take the bolt out of the back of the head to take the transmission dipstick tube off. And then we'll take the torque converter off. So I'm gonna get all those bolts out. I'm gonna get these lines off and get the wiring disconnected. You can also disconnect this vent right here, and we will reinstall it when we go to put it back in the car. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and completely remove this from the transmission, and I'll put it back on when I go to put it back in the car. Okay, I went ahead and removed everything except for the dipstick tube. So I've got all the wiring disconnected. Unfortunately, that little bolt broke off inside of the transmission, so I'm gonna have to drill it out and retap it. I'll have to just redo that. Or I'll see if whoever I get to rebuild the transmission will do that, because I'm not gonna rebuild the transmission myself, just because I don't have anywhere here to do it that's clean enough that I would feel comfortable enough putting this thing back together. Because with all this dirt and sand and stuff, I don't want any of that shit getting in the transmission. So I'm gonna pay somebody else to rebuild it. If I had somewhere clean to do it, I'd do it myself, but unfortunately I don't, so I'm gonna take it somewhere. But I got all that disconnected. I did not take the dipstick tube off yet. I will. But now I've got the cover off the bottom down here. So now I'm gonna go ahead and take these bolts out right here. Now, if you're trying to remove this transmission while it's in the car, this would really, all you need to be doing would just be to drop that pan, disconnect those couple electrical connectors, and then take these bolts out on the back side of the torque converter. Or I mean the torque converter. And you should have four, either 3 or 4. It depends on how the torque converter is made. I think this one's got 3. but you got to rotate the crankshaft to get these bolts around to where you can get to them. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the starter out to make it a little bit easier for me to get to these bolts. But if you're doing this, you don't necessarily have to take the starter out if you're doing it with it in the car. You can still leave the starter bolted up. Since I'm taking this entire engine completely apart and it doesn't matter to me, I'm going to go ahead and take the starter off to make it easier on myself. Okay, so to remove the starter, you've got a little 8mm bolt right here. And then this 1/2-inch bolt right here is what I took off to disconnect the battery cable when I went to pull the motor. So the only wire that I have left hooked up is that one. And then you've got a bolt right here and another bolt right here, and the starter comes right off. I don't think this engine has shims in it, but I'll find out when I take it apart. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. All right, guys, this motor has not been turned in 11 years. So I'm really hoping this thing turns over relatively easy. I got my torque wrench on here. I've got it set at 30 foot-pounds, so hopefully it will turn with less than 30 foot-pounds of pressure. I'm gonna see if it does. I really don't wanna go over 30 foot-pounds to get this thing to turn. So let's see what happens. All right, let's go up to 50. All right, it's turning at 50 foot-pounds. So it's a little tight, but I also still have the spark plugs in here. So it should be building compression. There was nothing wrong with this car when I stopped driving it. So there shouldn't be anything wrong internally in the motor other than the fact that it's been sitting. So I don't think there's been any water that's gotten into the motor. It feels like it's turning pretty smooth. But yeah, since it's turning over, now I should be able to get to all the screws for the torque converter, and then I can take the transmission. All right, so I got the starter off. It's 2 different length bolts. You got a long one and a short one. They're both 9/16 heads. The bolt for the torque converter, it looks like there's 3 of them, and they are a 5/8 head. They're pretty short, and they do have Loctite on them from the factory, so they're a little stiff to get off. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull the other 2 bolts. Once I get the other 2 bolts, I'll put a pry bar in here and separate it from the flex plate. And then I can take the bolts out holding the bell housing to the transmission, and I can take the whole transmission off. All right, I don't know if there's any significance to this, but I'm gonna document it just in case. The bolt on the bottom on both sides of the transmission, so the very bottom bolt on this side and on the other side, is a flange nut or a flange bolt. So, which means that it has the washer built into the head. All right. The second bolt up has a washer. Same on that side. The second bolt up had a washer. And then this one's got this bracket on it with the washer. That one did not have anything else on it with the washer. This one does not have a washer. And this one does not have a washer. But that one has the bracket for the wiring. Just wanted to record that just in case it means anything in the future. But all the bolts are out of the transmission now. So now, and I have taken the bolt out of the dipstick tube. Now I did not pull the dipstick tube. I did drain the transmission, but I don't want to leave that open. I'm going to leave the dipstick tube in here because I don't know how long it's going to be before I take this to somebody to get it rebuilt. So I'm going to just leave it covered up out here, and I want to leave the dipstick tube in it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the transmission off, and then I'll have just the engine by itself, and I'll be ready to start getting it set up to put on an engine stand. All right, so now that everything's separated, I'm going to go ahead and separate the transmission. So I'm just going to make sure that the torque converter is in the transmission as far as I can get it to go before I separate the transmission from the engine. So now I should be able to just separate it, and there we go. Transmission's off. So I am still draining some antifreeze. Thought that I had it all out of there. I didn't pull the block plugs, so that's probably where it's coming from. But now you can see the transmission's completely separated. Now I'm going to work on removing the wiring harness off of the engine and get just the engine by itself, and then I'll take the flex plate off and I'll mount it to an engine stand. All right, now that I have the entire wiring harness off, I can repair what needs to be repaired on the harness. But now I can get to other things on this motor. There is a separate connector for the water pump, I guess. I'm thinking that's for the water pump that comes up here. Quick disconnect for it, so you don't have to disconnect it down there. But everything else, basically quick disconnects come off. So now I'm gonna pull the flex plate off. I may not even have to pull the flex plate off to put my motor or put my engine stand on here. If my engine stand will fit with the flex plate still on here, I'm gonna leave the flex plate on here. Or no, I don't know, I'm not, because I need to replace the rear main seal. Or I can replace, well, shit, I don't know. I'll figure it out. All right, so I think before I continue going with this motor, I'm actually gonna go ahead and pressure wash it before I start tearing anything else off of it. So I'm gonna mount it on the engine stand. I'm probably actually gonna leave it out here because this thing's heavy and it's too hard to move it across this dirt to get it up to the porch. It takes everything I got to get one of these motors up to the porch to do it. So I think I'm just gonna leave it here and build it out here, and I'll just cover it with a tarp as I'm building it. It's taking everything out of me to move it up to the porch and back. So I'm gonna mount it on the engine stand out here. Then I'll bring my pressure washer out here, pressure wash the motor off, and then I'll start tearing it apart out here. I'll still carry all the parts up to the porch, but I won't ever take the block up there just because it's so damn heavy. So I'll just keep it out here. All right, so I got the engine up on the engine stand. That thing's pretty darn heavy. It's tilting the engine stand. That engine stand is rated for 1,300 pounds, so it's got plenty of weight capacity, but that thing's pretty damn heavy. So I'm gonna go ahead and start removing some pieces off of here, get some weight off of it. And anyway, I gotta get into it so that I can replace gaskets and stuff. So first thing I'm probably gonna do is remove the exhaust, both manifolds. I'll probably take the water pump off and probably take the intake manifold off and then go from there. All right, y'all, I was having a little trouble getting the water pump off because the shaft was rusted together, but I got the water pump off. I've got to leave to go pick my son up from tennis practice. When I get back, I'm gonna pull the intake, valve covers, and I'll pull the OptiSpark crank pulley and finish tearing this thing down. I'll have the heads off of here. Once I get the heads off, I'll conclude the video because this is just gonna be tear down of the motor. Hopefully you were able to gather everything that I've been doing in the time lapse, but basically disconnected the EGR tube from the back of the intake, disconnected the smog pump hoses from the crossover tube, then disconnected the pump from the crossover tube, then removed the bracket. Every bolt that I removed on the front was a 9/16, except for those front bolts on the water pump, and they do not have to be removed in order to remove the water pump. You only got to remove these outside 6 bolts and then pry it off. It's really stiff on that shaft. I don't know if it's normally that stiff, but you can see the rust coming off of there. So this thing's, it was seized on there a little bit, but all the exhaust came off real smooth, didn't have any issues. Same with this side. So now I'm gonna work on pulling the intake, pull the crank pulley and the OptiSpark, and finish tearing it down. All right, everybody, so I just got done using a Harmonic balancer puller. You can rent these at AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts or whatever, or you can buy them. They're pretty cheap. But you bolt into these 3 bolt holes, use the center pusher to push the Harmonic balancer off. I actually left the 5/8 bolt in here and used it as my press. And now this just comes right off. So, and there's no key on that. It's just pressed on. So there is no key inside of there. Even though the crankshaft has a spot for a key, there is no key in the harmonic balancer. All right, after you remove the harmonic balancer, you take out the 3 bolts holding the OptiSpark in. So it's that bolt, and that bolt. OptiSpark pops off. There's a pin that will line up the OptiSpark when you put it back together. I'll show that in the assembly video. But now I'm down to where I want to be. So this is going to be the this is going to be a front case seal. That's going to be a front case seal, and then you're going to have another seal up here. So you'll have 3 seals to replace if you pull the timing cover off. I've got it now to where I'm going to pull the intake manifold. I'll pull the valve covers, and then I'll pull the heads off. And then I've basically got it disassembled as far as I want to disassemble it. All right, so after looking this over a little bit more thoroughly, it does look like I'm going to need to pull the fuel rails and the injectors to make it easier to access the bolts. I mean, I don't necessarily have to. I could get around pulling them, but I'm going to replace the injector O-rings anyway. And I also need to take the throttle body off. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the throttle body. It's going to be these 4 bolts right here, right there, and right there. The throttle body will come off. I will have to disconnect this tube, I think. No, that's not going to the throttle body. So the only tube that's left hooked up to the throttle body is right here, and that's going back to the ports on the back of the head. So I have to disconnect that. I'll actually disconnect this entire piece. So I'll unbolt here and disconnect the hose and take that off. Then I'll remove the throttle body. Then, I don't know, I might leave the fuel injectors on here and just pull, I don't know. I'll figure it out. All right, guys, I've got it down to where it's just the blocking heads. I need to make up a little platform or a pattern board so that I can lay out all my push rods so that they go back in where they belong. A lot of people wouldn't worry about that. I do, because you adjust them by, you got to rotate the damn thing and then get this set when the lobe is at the bottom, and it's got to have such amount of pressure. I don't remember the exact procedure, but you can fine tune it with a push rod where it doesn't belong, but I like to keep them where they originated from. So I'm going to mark all of them. That way I can put them back in their original locations. But once I get that pattern made, I'll break loose the rocker arms. I might not even break loose the rocker arms. I might not. I might just break the heads loose and take the heads off. But I might break the rocker arms loose just so that I can make sure I can get all of them broke loose before I take the heads apart. So, yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do. But I'll go ahead and relieve the pressure on all the push rods, get all the push rods taken out, get them laid out in my template that I make. And once I get all the push rods out and get all the rocker arms basically rotated to where the push rod's not there anymore on both heads, then I'll start removing the bolts for the heads. So you got a series of bolts. It's standard GM head. So you got a bolt here, 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 here. So they alternate all the way up, and then you got a series of bolts along the exhaust side. So it's best to follow a pattern when you're taking it apart. So follow the tightening sequence in reverse order. I don't typically do it with the intake manifold when I'm taking it apart. When I'm putting it together, I do follow a tightening sequence. But when I'm taking one off, I don't generally follow it in reverse order. But yeah, we're going to pull all the push rods and then get the heads off, and then we'll see what the top of the pistons look like in this thing. All right, so now you can see I've got all my push rods lined up, 1 through 8 on that side, 1 through 8 on that side. Starting out from the front, I've got the tab flipped out so that it designates that's the front of the push rods. I'm going to wind up writing an F on the front of there. But essentially just loosen all the rocker arms, pull the push rods out one at a time. Keep them, I keep them the direction that they came out. So the top that was in here is the top that's over there, and they're in order 1 through 8 1 through 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's what I got over there. Same over here. So now that I've got all that off, now I'm going to go ahead and remove the heads. And these nuts are a 5/8, and the head bolts are a 5/8. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the head, but to remove the head, you do it in the reverse order of the tightening sequence. So I'm going to break loose this one, then go over here, then I'll go down here, over here, and it just keeps working around the outside to the inside. And you do it a quarter turn to a half a turn at a time until you get pressure off of all the bolts, then you can take them all out. All right, guys, I got all the bolts loose for the head for the driver's side, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it off. Go ahead and pull all the head bolts and put them in this baggie. Not that I plan on reusing them, that way I can keep track of them. Yeah, I may leave those ones in there. Okay. All right, let's see what this head looks like, or what the pistons look like underneath here. All right. Shoot, that head don't look bad at all. And neither do these pistons. Now, I haven't said how many miles are on this motor, but this engine's got 180,000 miles on it. So, my dad drove it as a work vehicle, and he drove it every day for work. And then when I got it and I found out how rare it was, I never drove it because I didn't want to put more miles on it. But there's no ridge in the piston wall. And this is why I don't plan on pulling the pistons and re-ringing it or redoing the bearings. Even though it has 180,000 miles, these Chevy blocks tend to last for freaking very long time as long as you take care of them. And I know my dad did. He changed the oil religiously in this thing. The only neglect is the fact that it's been sitting for the last, it sat for about 4 or 5 years before I took ownership of it. Then I drove it for 6 months, and then it sat for another 11 years. So all said and done, it has sat about 15 to 16 years total during its life. But everything looks really good. I'm actually really happy with how everything looks. I'm not as shocked as I thought I was going to be. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the video, but when I took the water pump off, the bearing was completely busted on the backside, and the cage for all the ball bearings was actually broken. So all the ball bearings were down on one side of the bearing. So it's a good thing that I'm taking this thing apart before I tried to run it, because I could have done some serious damage to the motor. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull that head, and then I'm basically going to be done with the engine teardown. Next video will be cleaning everything up and start reassembly of the motor. All right, there everybody. There you have it. That's how you take the entire engine apart, with the exception of the timing cover, the camshaft, and the oil pan and crankshaft and all that. And I didn't pull the lifters. I will pull the lifters, I just haven't done it yet. This is where I'm going to stop. I'll show pulling the lifters and pulling the front timing cover and replacing the front main seal and rear main seal during my reassembly video. But yeah, now at this point, all I'm going to do is work on cleaning the block up, get it ready to regasket it, and just clean the ever-living crap out of it. I'll probably repaint the block. I'm more than likely going to go get some POR and paint the chassis. It's got a scale coat of rust on it, so I may get in there and wire brush the chassis and then paint it with some POR, just to make it look better in there and make it hold up a little bit longer. I don't know if POR is the right choice, but that may be the route that I go. But anyway, so that's going to wrap up this video. This is going to be, like I said, the entire teardown of the engine. I'll have another video. I don't know when I'll post another video on this one. It'll probably be another week or two, because I'm waiting on the gasket kit to arrive. I ordered a gasket kit with new head bolts. So, and then I still need to order new water pump, new power steering pump. I need to order all the other parts that I have to replace with this. But I also may be having another vehicle that I might be going to pick up today. Trying to see if I can get another vehicle that's cheap enough to where I can go ahead and get it registered and give it to my son. That way I can take a little bit more time and actually do the Impala the way that it deserves. That way I can tear it completely down and get the chassis completely recoated and get it looking good. Redo the suspension, the brakes, reupholster the seats, and repaint the exterior of the vehicle. This could turn into a really big project if I wind up getting the other car, just because this car deserves it. And like I say like I said in my last video, I'm not a purist when it comes to cars, but this car, just the fact that my dad's the original owner of it, and I have a lot of childhood memories in this car, plus the fact that it's rare in its production. So I think it deserves the quality and attention to detail that I should devote to it. So I'm hoping that I can get another vehicle for my son. So this may turn into a much bigger project than I originally anticipated, which will be better for the car in the long run. So, but I'll let you know when I post another video. But like always, if you like what you saw in this video, or if it helped you out in any way, please like, comment, share, subscribe, let your friends see what I'm doing. I'm not going to discuss what car I'm going to get, but it is a vehicle that I already own. So it'll be a duplicate of something that I already have. But it's a different version. So I'm going to be doing a video on the Veloster before the end of this week. And I'll also have a video on the Lexus. I'll have an update on the Lexus, hopefully by Monday of next week. Things haven't been really going that fast on that car because I'm on vacation and he's not. So I'm working on my stuff, and he's been going out with his girlfriend, and which, I mean, more power to him. But I don't have a significant other right now, so I'm focused on my work. So I'm able to get a whole lot more done, and he's not here as much, so can't really get as much work done to the vehicle that I can do by myself. Especially since it's not my vehicle. So anyway, I'll check y'all in the next video. Have a great one.